Paul May and James Bulley. Welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thanks, Marcus. Great to be here.
You guys are the co-founders of Trivandi. So let's start there. What is Trivandi and what are your respective roles?
Well, shall I start? So Trivandi was set up after London 2012 to share the knowledge of what it took to deliver and operate the Olympic and Paralympic Games in London. And the name actually comes from the three co-founders of the Tri is James Bulley, myself, Paul May, and Jonathan Branson. And the Vandy comes from venues and infrastructure, V&I. So we were always known as the V&I team because we oversaw the venues and the infrastructure for London 2012. So that's where the name comes from. And that's pretty much what we do now around the world. We advise on the delivery and operation of events and venues.
Interesting. And you are the CEO, right?
Yes, I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders.
So as the CEO, what is your role?
Well, in Trivandi world, it's everything. We have two words on our job description, which is team player, and that's pretty much what we do. So if I've got to make tea for the team, that's what I do. If I've got to set the strategy and talk to clients and win over the support of governments and deliver national projects, we do that too. So pretty much anything from setting the strategy, developing the business, winning client work and delivering project work as well. That's very much the ethos of Trivandi is to get stuck in. We very much feel the experience that we bring from years and years of being involved in major sports venues, sports events and other major events and venues is to be imparted back on all the projects we work on. So we very, very much stay close to our projects, despite the fact that we might be a chief executive or an executive director or chairman.
Interesting. So yeah, and Paul, the executive director and chairman, is it two words in your job description as well?
Very much so. Yeah, no, it's exactly as James described. I mean, when we first formed the company, I mean, it was just the three of us, as James mentioned. And so, you know, when you form a new business and you start getting yourself off the ground, it very much is all hands to the pumps. And I think we are, you know, project people as well. We love getting involved in projects, particularly when you're working on fantastic events, sports projects, venues, whatever it might be. We like to stay in touch, and we know that, you know, our clients appreciate us staying in touch as well. So yes, whilst I'm one of the founders, executive director and chairman, just like James, you know, we do whatever it takes really just to lead the business and drive the projects forward.
Amazing. So you mentioned that after 2012, you started Trivandi, London 2012. So what was it that you had worked with events and, you know, similar things prior to this? So what was it after London 2012 that made you take this decision to start Trivandi?
It actually started with a pizza in an Italian restaurant in Canary Wharf, where we were based in the organising committee. Paul and I were sitting down one lunchtime thinking, what on earth are we going to do after London 2012? It's been so amazing. The whole journey, I was working on it for 9 years, from the bid right the way through to the delivery and operation and closeout. And we sat together and we said, well, we can't leave it there. We've learned so much. Let's share the knowledge. So yeah, it was a fairly easy decision when you've got two brilliant people that you've worked with before for the last 7 years delivering the Olympic and Paralympic Games. First of all, you want to keep working with them. So we said, let's work with great people on great projects and just share the knowledge. So that's what we did.
Yeah, and I think, Marcus, once you've worked on a big, interesting, complex project like an Olympic Games, particularly when you've worked on one in your home city, as we did, you know, you want to replicate that feeling. There is nothing like working on a major event project. And, you know, once you've done that, the idea of kind of returning to civilian life almost, you know, kind of doesn't feel like the right move. You want to have the same experience again. You want to work on fantastic projects with brilliant people. And I think when we'd worked so extensively in the organising committee for London 2012, we'd learned so much from being on the inside and being part of the strategic plan and direction and delivery of the games. You learn so much, and you can see opportunities to kind of use what you've learned to be able to apply it and do it even better next time. And, you know, you kind of can ride the crest of a wave of a really fantastic and successful event like London 2012 was. But actually, and importantly, you can see how you could do it better again next time, because you've been in the middle, you got true and authentic experience that you know will go and help others to deliver it even better.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it takes a team to bring on such a mega event. And you mentioned the bid was 9 years, so you're working 9 years up to have an event like this. So for most people, I guess, don't know really the process. So can you just like briefly describe, so from the bid 9 years prior up until the event, what's going on during this time?
Well, it starts obviously, as you say, with even before the bid. Governments have to consider why do they want to have or host an Olympic Games, and for many cities and countries, they will be thinking about, well, how does it support their city development plans? What does it mean from a legacy point of view for business, for tourism? How does it profile and put the world's spotlight on the country from an investment point of view and so on. For London, it was very much about the regeneration of East London, and the opportunity to inspire the younger generation to take up sport, all part of the healthy living, healthy lifestyles. And so when we joined the bid team, one of my first projects was to look at the legacy strategy and see what the socio-economic legacy would be, what the business and tourism legacy would be, but very importantly, the regeneration legacy, and how we can increase participation in sport. The second part to it is then to figure out the venue master plan. That's the very, very tough start point. How do you put an Olympic and a Paralympic Games into a city or into a country? It has a massive impact. And certainly if you think about Brisbane 2032 and even those cities now thinking about bidding for the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, that's a very important start point, is how do you provide the competition venues? And it's not just the 35 plus competition venues you need. It's an Olympic Village, it's a media centre, there's all the transport infrastructure that's needed. We had over 120 sites and venues used for the Olympic Games that are required to support the event. So it's a massive undertaking. I remember the guys from Sydney 2000 came over to London and said to me, whatever you think and however big you think this event is going to be, 10 times it. Well, actually, you probably need 100 times it, because you can't perceive how big it is until you start getting going on it. So that initial work was all about, how do you come up with a venue master plan? What is the feasibility studies for it? What are the legacy of those venues? What are all the other aspects to it in terms of the campaign that goes around it to win the votes and so on? So that's the early bid stage. I could talk for an hour on that, but I'll save you that. And then getting into the moment you win it, it's what are those long lead-in time projects you've got to get involved straight away to do. For London, it was undergrounding the power lines. There was overhead power cables across the Olympic Park site. And it was a 7-year lead-in time to dig the tunnels, put the power lines underground. They did the same in Sydney Olympic Park. So we kicked that off straight away, and then had to put the organisations in place, the organising committee, the delivery authorities, getting that initial governance right, getting the budgets right, getting the roadmap right, getting the resources and hiring the right people. All those things in place at the outset are absolutely key and critical to the foundations and start point. And then, of course, you go into many, many years of planning and preparation till eventually you get to the operational phase, operational readiness, and you go live and the world's media turns up and they're spotlighting what's going on. And of course, the athletes then have, by that point, they're trained, they're prepared, they've done their test events, they're qualified, and they're there and performing at their very best. That's the really exciting part. And then, of course, you've got to take it all down, and all the dissolution is a huge undertaking.
And when you're in the middle of it, if you're not careful, you can blink and it's finished, and all of this fantastic work that you've done can pass you by. So it's really important, and we encourage our teams to make sure that actually you soak up the moment, because it is an extraordinary thing to be involved in, and it is immensely difficult and challenging for everybody concerned. But when it all comes to fruition, you just have to somehow be able to let the memories stick and try and find a moment to enjoy it, because, you know, it's over in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm sure. And based on what you said with the venues and you need to take everything down, sustainability is a big aspect of mega events. And I know that that's something that you work very hard on at Trivandi as well. You have your own head of sustainability. So how are you working with regard to sustainable events at Trivandi?
It's a really important point to consider, particularly when you have events of the scale that they are for an Olympic Games. You don't need venues with these spectator capacities you need for Olympic Games afterwards, and avoiding what we called white elephant venues was really key to the venue master plan in London, for example. So 20 of the venues in London, of the 35 competition venues, were actually temporary venues. So they were just built specifically for the events and then taken down and taken away afterwards, leaving behind only 7 permanent new venues that were built for a legacy after the games, such as the Aquatic Centre, the Olympic Stadium, the Velodrome, and so on. So getting that right is really key. And our sustainability advisors are much more sophisticated than they were back when we were working on London 2012. We're now doing carbon footprinting, so we can actually measure the actual carbon footprint of the event, but not just of the event itself and the event operations, but also the embodied carbon of all of the materials that are used and where they're sourced and how they're brought to the site. And that's often overlooked. And that's a really key part. If you're really serious about sustainability, it's not just about are you using reusable cups or are you putting a solar panel on a roof? It is looking at the entire carbon footprint that the event brings about from travel right the way through. So, for example, we've recently been working on COP28, and a really important thing there was to work out all of the travel that people came from wherever they were traveling from to the event, and to understand what the offset would be required for that. Looking at every single part of the operation and training caterers in sustainable sourcing of foods and sustainable meal plans, for example. All of these things are really important. And what it does is actually helps a country, a city, to move forward in terms of their sustainability operations. So as an example, many cities don't have compostable or reusable recycling centres of the scale that's needed for the type of event, even some of the cities we work in. And we're able to educate them, train them, make them aware, and then they invest in those type of facilities that they need. So those sort of things are improvements that we can bring. But overall, we look very closely to deliver all events in line with ISO 2012-1, which is the sustainability standard. And more events now are looking to get that accreditation. So we help event owners go through that accreditation process and do the certification process for them as well.
If we look at the London 2012 that you were both very, of course, involved in, what are some learnings from that event that you take with you now?
Yeah, I'll kick off with that one. I mean, there are many learnings. I mean, it's the truth. There are a lot of different factors that ultimately made that project a success. I think for me, it started, James has alluded to this, it started really with having clarity of vision and purpose. And so actually, the work that was done during the bid, which was fantastic to scrutinize, what was the point of hosting the games and what were the outcomes that the country, the city, and all the stakeholders were looking for. That was really well articulated, I think, in the bid. And so one key learning is around, making sure that there's real big picture clarity about, what ultimately success looks like. And then it's about sort of trying to get alignment amongst all the key stakeholders. And I think in London, again, one of the successes of London, and this was by no means perfect, but one of the successes was getting all the key stakeholders from central government, the city authorities, local authorities, and the delivery bodies like Local, who we were working with, to make sure that everybody was bought into what a good positive outcome would be, so that everybody's running in the same direction, even if sometimes you're barging into each other and rubbing shoulders with each other. At least you're all running in the same direction. And so having sort of a team ethic and a team ethos across stakeholders, I think, was really, really important. And that's not always the case. I think leadership is another big one, having really fantastic leadership across the key delivery organizations. And we were blessed in LOCOG with the leadership that we had, particularly under Paul Dighton, Lord Dighton, who was fantastic as chief exec, and Seb Coe, of course. And I think ultimately it comes down to teamwork. It comes down to people. And we had a really brilliant team that we were working with in LOCOG. In the venues and infrastructure department, we had some exceptional people who came together, a very diverse group of people with different skill sets, backgrounds, and all brought something unique and different to the party. But the thing that made everybody common and what brought everybody together was the ethos of having a team spirit, of coming together in a collaborative way to achieve an end game, so that everybody could support each other and back each other up. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot in there, but I guess the most fundamental thing for me was all about the people and how everybody came together and the spirit of teamwork.
If I can add to that, I think where London moved the dial is on guest experience. So if you had the opportunity to go to London 2012, it had a very special feel, not least because of the volunteers and the training that they were given to be themselves and just express their own sort of individuality and culture. And when people came to, for example, the Olympic Park or any of our venues, they were welcomed, they were given lots of information that they needed, they were entertained, every part of their journey was mapped in terms of what are their needs and what would make their experience go from being a good experience to being a great experience, and how could we bring that about. And not all of that was forced or planned. Some of that was just it came about. So for example, volunteers on some of the locations and bridges would put their iPods on and put the megaphones up to it, and they'd be playing music and they'd be high-fiving, and they would, you know, run in and take pictures with families, and you know, that sort of people connectivity was very special, and we're rolling that out very strongly in a lot of different events post 2012. I think the other thing is it was a very athlete-focused games, and I think again probably one of the first times at a major event, athletes had been at the center of every part of the planning. We had an athletes commission and athlete representatives, people like Steph Cook and Tim Henman and Jonathan Edwards were part of that, and we ran out all the plans via them and said, okay, well, what would an athlete need? And so things such as, you know, the quality of the training facilities, the travel times between training facilities and venues, what would they need in the accommodation, even down to the duvets and the bedside lamps and everything were checked by the athletes committee to just make sure that they were the best possible facilities, so that the athletes, when they came to London 2012, were able to focus on what they needed to do to be at their best and not concerned about the conditions that they had to live and train in.
That's really interesting. And of course, that helps the athletes a lot to perform at their best on such an important event. So again, London 2012, one of the events of many that you have worked on, the two of you. So after an event, when you're summarizing, how do you evaluate if an event was successful or not?
Yeah, it's a really important point, because it comes back to my original point around the why. Why are you hosting this event? And if it is about increasing tourism, or it's about socioeconomic improvements, if it's about regeneration, and or if it's about increasing investment, all those things are very important. So an event host needs to think about that right at the outset, because it's not something you do when you get to the end of the event. You know, you need all the data, you need all the evaluation criteria set out, you need to do the measurements, you need to do the surveys and so on as you're going through the event. So I think it's becoming a little bit more sophisticated now and more common that events are looking for that event evaluation. And certainly we're seeing it more regularly now. And it means that when you set out the criteria and your objectives from the outset, you can also then set that into the strategy, and that flows down into all the planning. So if it's going to be the most sustainable event ever, then everything is looked through the sustainability lens. All the decisions you make in terms of, you know, are you going to have prime running generators? Are you going to look to bring in sustainable fuel or whatever it is. Those decisions are therefore flowing from that, and then you can evaluate that afterwards. Same for the regeneration of East London. That wasn't just all going to be delivered in London 2012. It had to be a long-term plan, and it's still ongoing. And you need to have the governance, the structures, the organizations, and the funding protected for that, so that you can actually deliver on that post event. And that's, again, I think one of the success stories of London, how the London Olympic Park has transitioned, increasing connectivity between the various different neighborhoods with new bridges, new roads, with a legacy development corporation in place, focused on those legacy outcomes. So yes, it needs to be planned at the outset. It needs to be flowing through the whole planning of the and operation of the events, and then the outcomes need to continue to be delivered afterwards and evaluated all the way through.
Very interesting. And I mean, that's also with mega events, that the criticism that some events get is that you have the event and then you just abandon everything. Like what you mentioned now is so important, that you have these values and you continue to move these out also after the event.
You were saying that's exactly right, Marcus. And our experience from London 2012 was that very often legacy was the first consideration. Actually, if something was being built or delivered as a piece of infrastructure, actually, what is the legacy case for it? And of course, there's a real balance between maintaining a focus on legacy and making sure that you are going to achieve the requirements of the games, particularly given the focus on guest experience, as James was alluding to. But, having a real focus on the long term and ultimately what's going to be left behind after the games, and ensuring that that is part of the big picture plan that flows from the, the ultimate vision and objectives and outcomes that were articulated way back when.
I think if I may just add one other point, which I think is an interesting one, is around the human legacy of the understanding of and the ability for the city to have a workforce who can actually deliver future major events. So one of the projects we were asked to lead was the Asian Indoor Martial Arts Games in Turkmenistan in 2017, which was the first time that in Ashgabat in Turkmenistan, any major international event had been staged. And so they had no workforce there, no infrastructure or any event experience personnel in country. And what they didn't want to do was import it all. So we set up a training academy and trained 470 local people in event operations. And so by the time we got to the test events, they had the opportunity to experience the test events before they went live on the actual event. It was a 15-day event with about 15 different sports across 12 different major venues. That enabled them to have a legacy. So when they hosted subsequently the World Weightlifting Championships and then the World Track Cycling Championships, they were able to do that with their existing staff without calling in international experts. And that's what we're seeing a lot now in the Middle East, as we're starting to see more and more new countries hosting more major sporting events. And we're able to train those people so they can do what we do. And I think that's really important. We can't have, again, from a sustainability point of view, all the consultants flying in, just doing the event and then flying back out again. You need to leave that human legacy as well.
Yeah, that's very important. And your team has grown over the last, you celebrated 10 years last year with Trivandi, and now you're having over 40 permanent staff across 4 global offices, and 2 of these in the Middle East, as you just mentioned.
That's right. We're actually up to 50 now. It's growing very quickly, but the essence of our business, we have to be able to service different projects, different countries. We work across 26 different countries over the last 10 years. And with different specialisms. So you can't have a big sort of team sitting on the bench waiting to be deployed into a different country just on the payroll. But at the same time, you want a core of staff. So we built an organization, as I say, about 50 strong now. That's going to grow very rapidly. We'll probably be 75 strong by the end of this year. But the core of our resources come from an associate network that we've developed with over about 1,750 people, I think there is now on that associate network. But they are all specialists who are tried, tested, trusted, that we have worked with before on major events. We vetted their background and their experience, so that whenever a client calls us and say we need a ticketing specialist to go to Lima to run an event, we can find that person for them. And that's enabled us to have the ability to call in any person anywhere on any event at any time. So that's the business model, and that's what's enabling us to service so many different countries.
Looking ahead, you mentioned your team is going to grow in the years to come. Paul, if I'm asking you, how do you see the event industry changing in the next coming years? Like, what are some trends? What do you think will change in the event industry going forward?
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be a real revolution of change that's going to be coming forward as we sort of look towards the next 5-10 years or so. I think geography is a big part of it, of course. The Middle East, as James has mentioned, is a real hotbed for events and sports projects, given the ambitions that exist there. North America, of course, has got its own fair share of events, with the FIFA World Cup and the Olympics taking place as well. So, needing to be agile around serving those communities and providing the support and expertise needed there. I think we're also seeing some real change around event formats. And so, looking at maybe sort of well-established events formats and how can they innovate, become very forward-looking in terms of the way they present themselves. How can they embrace new technology to be able to present themselves as well, both in real time to spectators, but also online and via the digital community. And we're sort of increasingly finding ourselves involved in those types of projects, which are looking at staging new formats and presenting sports events in a slightly different way. I think there's a big push as well towards sort of professionalization. There's a need for a layer of professionalization within the industry as well, which I think is very important and comes off of what James was saying around our ability to be able to help some of our clients, some of the countries and territories that we work to train up their people, but also to layer that with sort of new standards that should be adopted for events, helping to raise the bar in terms of the events industry operating in a way which is aligned to other sectors, other industries, putting in place an ISO standard that would be applicable within the world of major events, for example, creating an industry body that would have advocacy across all of the events that sit within the global portfolio as well. So I think, we're going to see quite a lot of a shift change over the next 5 or 10 years. Certainly going to be very dynamic. It's going to be very exciting and lots of opportunity.
I think if I may add to that, the other part to it from an event point of view is how technology is changing, how people consume content, media, way in which media are broadcasting. With the technology in broadcasting, I just remember in London 2012, the first 3D cameras, the first long span overhead wired cable cameras. This is the days before drones and the like. But I think if you remember in Tokyo, the way in which they presented the athletics with the spotlight on each of the runners on the lanes and lighting the lanes, and all of this sport presentation piece to it, and the way in which you can spotlight the athlete, showcase the athlete, you can get all the information data, and you can bring that straight to your phones. You can see replays, you can do great things with lasers and lights, and there's going to be, I feel, that entertainment side. Sport is entertainment at the end of the day, and that through these new ways of using technologies and sport presentation, and the way in which data can be utilized and processed and made available at very quick time, will be a really exciting advancement in the way in which these events are run and operated.
Definitely. So you mentioned technology, also AI is of course getting more and more popular and useful. So how do you at Trivandi work with regards to innovation and to leveraging technology in your operations?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's exactly one of the areas that we are looking in at very carefully at the moment. We've created a research and innovation hub within Trivandi. We've pulled in some of the world-leading experts in sports events and in sport generally to basically give their views, their expertise, their vision as to how things will move and change in the future, what the art of the possible would be, and then relate that back to technologies. So we're also now engaging that team to look at what other technologies are there, what technologies are being utilized in the market already, but looking at those areas where there's challenges still to solve or opportunities to bring in these new technologies. We've worked with some of the universities and some very interesting AI products that are being developed to the extent that, you know, some of the conversations we're having are, so what if, can you solve that with AI? And I can't go into a lot of that because of the commercial sensitivities of it, but there's some fascinating stuff that you can do that you weren't able to do before AI was around. So we're exploring all of that through our research and innovation hub.
I think the other aspects for our creative team, we have a design team, Marcus. We've got a team of architects who work on the creative side of venue and event preparations and planning, and they're having a lot of fun with AI. As you can imagine at the moment, we work on projects where we have to bring to life our creative vision for our clients, often at a very early stage where clients are very demanding about wanting to understand what traditionally might have been conveyed in 2 dimensions now needs to be conveyed in 3 or 4. And so our creative team are having a lot of fun at how we can best take advantage of AI technology. And we use it for, you know, some of our 3D imaging of some of our projects to help bring to life, if we're thinking about, you know, what a new concept might look like for a venue or an event, that actually we can use AI to recreate that very quickly. Whereas previously it would have been quite a cumbersome and long-winded process involving lots of people in order to be able to do it. So we're able to be quite agile and quite responsive and present things in an innovative way, which, you know, attracts the interest in of our clients who expect it from us.
You mentioned that there's a lot of, you know, growth that will come this year, and you're working on, you know, several events all over the globe. So to tell the listeners a little bit now, it just entered 2024. What can we look forward to? What are you guys working on? Some cool events. What is happening on your end in 2024?
Well, look, what I was going to say, one of the big things, of course, is the Olympics. We're in the Olympic year, aren't we?
Yeah.
And you know, we start to get a tingle whenever we get into the Olympic year, given our background of where we've come from as a business and the fact that we've worked on all of the Olympic Games since London 2012. You know, when you get around to Olympic year, you know, it starts to feel special. And we're sort of really proud to have done work on Paris 24. And so that's going to be a big thing for us as we move forward. I think outside of that, you know, there's some fascinating stuff happening within the Middle East region that we're involved in, some of which we can talk about and some of which we can't. But as you know, the Middle East are sort of winning the rights to host some pretty big events, whether they're sort of continental games, whether they're World Expos, which obviously, you know, the Middle East has been a hotbed for that, or even ultimately the FIFA World Cup, and who knows, perhaps even the Olympics one day. And, you know, we play a role often in helping to shape a roadmap towards achieving some of those things and helping to make some of those events in the meantime very successful.
I think as Paul touched on there, the exciting thing that we're seeing is new formats of sport events. And as Paul alluded to, we're working on a few ideas around that as to how you can bring some of those traditional sporting events forward. Again, back to what we were saying earlier, in a format that is more engaging and consumable for particularly the younger populations who aren't always as engaged in sport, but they do love the excitement of, you know, short bursts, short clips, short you know, attention span, but things that are impactful. and experiences. So a lot of what we're working on at the moment inside some of the innovation and the creativity work that we're doing is to say, okay, well, if we took this sport and we rechanged that format and presented it in this way, what would that look like? And how would the athletes, feel about that? And so we're working with a lot of athlete representatives and athletes themselves as to, how would they like to see how that sport could be mixed up a little bit. And that's everything from, if as you've seen in perhaps some of the triathlon events, doing some different type relays and shorter events, sprints and so on, through to what could you do with all of the traditional sports and do them differently, but make them more exciting formats as we've seen. So certainly there's some of that stuff that we're working on, but as we say, some of that is still in its early creative stages, and we're not able to go into it in too much detail yet.
To add to that as well, Marcus, what we're experiencing is the work that we've been doing and the direction of travel around major sporting events and having the fan or the customer groups at the core of all the planning is translating into other types of events. And so, as James mentioned earlier on, COP28, which took place in Dubai before Christmas, was a big thing. And a lot of the learning and the planning that we have brought from large multi-sports events is transferable to a big government summit, a big world event like that. We have other events taking place which are non-sports events, which again, those things around putting the guests at the core of the planning and being very innovative about how you can actually activate their experience. We're finding that actually that is really translating from sports into non-sports events, which is great. We're able to apply our learnings across different sectors.
That's great. Has there been any bumps on the road during all these years with events? I'm sure that, in events, there are things coming up that you didn't expect and so forth, but maybe some more memorable bumps that you could share with the audience.
There was a very big bump during COVID. So for the events industry, that was a very absolutely challenging time because, of course, governments around the world stopped events from taking place. And the events industry is largely freelancers. And so, without furlough schemes and without events taking place, the events industry was really strongly struggling. We were very fortunate. We got requested by the UK government to come in and come up with an events research program to show what the spread of coronavirus would be amongst audiences by doing PCR tests pre and post events and putting them into various different arrangements in venues and so on. And the core focus was about getting the blue ribbon sports events of the British summertime events like Wimbledon and Ascot and the like back up and running and able to take place. The FA Cup final, for example, all of those. We were very much involved in the research behind that, working with the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and Department of Health to come up with ways in which that could be achieved, which was very exciting. We also had the opportunity to work for Qatar FIFA World Cup because it was their moment to do all of their test events, which they needed people in the venues to be able to do the load testings before the World Cup. So we were called in to support them on that. So that was a bit of a bump in the road, but what it meant is that we were able to write playbooks, come up with research programs from working with the medical practitioners and so on, and also support the industry more widely. And born out of that experience, also we realized, and Paul alluded to it earlier, that the events industry do not have the international professional body that represents them in a way that when these moments do happen, that they have a voice. And so when we were looking at this on behalf of UK government, we were going out to all the smaller associations that are there that exist and engaging from them, what do we need to do to support the industry? But one of the things we would like to do is to see how we can support the industry more widely by looking at, is there a professional international body that we can put in place to support the industry? So yeah, that's one of the big bumps in the road. there's been plenty of other bumps along the way. I think the issue and nature of the events industry is that people, as I said earlier, underestimate the size and scale of what these things take to put on, and quite often the budgets aren't enough, the resources aren't there, or the experience isn't there within the organizations, within governments that have taken on the responsibility to deliver them. We often get parachuted in at the last minute to try and help pull them round and make them happen. I think if you Google 5 most stressful jobs in the world, you'll see number 1 is the army, because you get shot. Number 2 is the fire brigade, because you get burnt. Number 3 is the ambulance service, because you're dealing with people who are about to die. Number 4 is live broadcasters. That's your job, Marcus. And then number 5 is event coordinators. And there's a reason for that, because everybody, at last minute, the pressure is on. You have an immovable deadline and you have to make it happen. So we would like to push the event coordinators back down the list of stressful jobs by educating clients and governments as to what it takes, and trying to have the right budgets and the right programs, right plans, and the right resources, so that then they don't get to that stressful situation.
I'd say number 6 is running and owning your own business. Yeah, which can also be a rocky road inevitably, and particularly when you're working in the events industry, which is so dynamic, with events coming and finishing, and things chopping and changing, and things don't always go to plan inevitably, largely out of anyone's control. And so I think for a business like us, being able to be agile, being resilient, remaining positive, and having a really good sense of humor, I think these are all characteristics that any business owner, particularly though one who works in the world of sports and events, these are really important characteristics.
Yeah, definitely. Before we sign off here, is there anything I haven't mentioned yet that you feel is important to bring up? Could be about events or Trivandi, or something else you want to mention.
Well, I think just flying a flag for the events industry, and I don't know what the demographic of your listeners actually is, Marcus, but if there are people who are just intrigued by the events industry, intrigued by the world of sports, it's a fascinating environment. Hopefully we've been able to bring that to life a little bit. But actually, if you're interested in sport, if that is your passion, if you want to get involved in live events because you just want to be at the cut and thrust of interesting things happening, this is the right industry for you. And so, I'd encourage people to engage with it, try it out, get some experience, get your hands dirty, but get involved, because it's a really interesting and fascinating environment to be working in.
I think just to add to that, it for us is about professionalizing that industry, because I think, when you speak to mum and dad to talk about what career you're looking to follow, events industry doesn't really come up. You're either going to be, a doctor, a dentist, an accountant, a lawyer, those traditional professions. But we would like to see the event industry professionalized. It is an extraordinary industry at the level we're operating at. We have management consultants working for us. We have architects. We have project managers, chartered surveyors, engineers, and so on. And it does bring together a number of different professions, but the operators themselves, we would like to be recognized as a profession, so that people do see it as a professional career. And I think we've got some way to go to get there. Paul and I are both chartered surveyors. We're probably the only event company that is a regulated body. We're regulated by the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. And so we would like to see more event companies seen as professional organizations and professional bodies. And that is all about training. It's about having assessment of professional competence and putting together some professional institution around it. So I think that's what we would like to see happening, and we're going to work hard to play our part in supporting the industry get there.
That's amazing. And I'm definitely super intrigued for events after talking to you guys for this time. So I would like to thank you very much, James and Paul, for taking the time to be on Sports Management Podcast.
It's our pleasure, Marcus.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks,
very much.
Marcus. Thank you.